let's start with quarterback. Okay, when we look at the 2025 free agent quarterback class, there's a handful of notable names in here. The one at the top that everybody's going to point to is, of course, Sam Darnold from the Minnesota Vikings. He was playing so well that there was even talk that maybe he doesn't even hit free agency, but now it feels like he will, especially after the last two games, not exactly being the best two games that he had this year. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields from the Pittsburgh Steelers, Aaron Rodgers from the Jets, Jameis Winston, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, and then Joe Flacco to kind of round things out as the more intriguing quarterback options that we have this free agency period. Dalton, I'll give you sort of dealer's choice of how you want to start this conversation here, but I do have a question for you after that. So where do you want to go first? Which one of those names really stands out to you?
So for as much as we have some traditionally big names and even a couple of Hall of Famers in there potentially one day, right? I think the headliner has to be Sam Darnold after the year he had in Minnesota. He's going to be 28 years old next season. And you're talking about a guy, his season finished in his last two games with a dud, but he's still the 11th best passing grade in the NFL, fourth in big-time throws with 34, but there's the drawback of he's still kind of risky with the football. 27 turnover-worthy plays, the most in the NFL. You and I talked about during the season how he went kind of hot and cold in the red zone. That was kind of a big factor in his performance in certain games. So he's certainly talented. He's certainly earned some sort of contract, right? He's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. And you have a situation very much like the Buccaneers had with Baker Mayfield after his first year of success down there, where, he's a gunslinger, but also it's pretty clear that he's a starter, right? He's developed himself into that level of quarterback, at least a midline starter. So I think the Darnold situation is really interesting, and the number of teams that could be in on him may depend on what they think of this draft class as well. I think it's all tied together. When you talk about teams like Tennessee or the Giants or the Raiders, these are the same teams we've been talking about at the top of the draft class potentially taking a quarterback. If one of them pays Sam Darnold something like 3 years and $100 million, that takes that option off the board. So Darnold's situation is really the most interesting considering he's the youngest guy other than Fields of this bunch, and last year he was the most productive.
Yeah, and when you look at sort of those QB-needy teams at the very top, the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Giants, the Las Vegas Raiders, the New York Jets, right? I think that those are all the ones that sort of come to mind that would be interested, or the most interested in this quarterback free agency class, because those are the ones that are also the most interested in the quarterback class coming up in the draft. But when you look at those teams, I don't think any of them want to be really desperate when it comes to the NFL draft. And so I'm just so intrigued to see how in on this free agent quarterback class a lot of those teams are, to maybe not go into the draft and be as desperate as what it seems like right now. I think the three quarterbacks that I would say teams are going to be most interested in, Sam Darnold's one of them, but then the other two you would have to trade for. Matthew Stafford, we've heard over the last couple of days and the last week that he could potentially be available via trade. And then Geno Smith's kind of the other one that we've sort of been talking about for the last year. So I think those are the top three that you look at. But my question for you is, outside of those trade options and Sam Darnold at the very top, which one of these guys, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, I'll throw Mac Jones in there as well. Joe Flacco's, really up there in age, so I wouldn't even consider him. But which one of those guys is next for you? Which one of those guys would you go, okay, if I got to have somebody to start for me next year and win ball games for you, which one are you taking? Independent, I'm talking independent of price. Price doesn't matter, whatever. Who would you actually choose out of that bunch? Who's next?
Honestly, it's probably Russell Wilson if you're talking just 2025, right? He did have a really solid season in Pittsburgh, and eventually their lack of weapons and lack of pass protection even just broke down their offense at the end of the year, and it became just them throwing goal balls. That was really their only good offensive production. So I think Wilson can still function in an offense with some weapons, get to a place where maybe he can throw underneath a little bit more, or even if he stays in Pittsburgh, add some weapons that can help him underneath as opposed to just throwing goal balls at George Pickens. So Wilson, to me, is probably the guy of that group. He had a good season. He was in the top 15 in passing grade. He had the number one deep passing grade in the league. So he's still got the deep ball. He can still threaten defenses vertically. I think for 1 year, maybe even two, it would be Russell Wilson for me.
I'm tempted to say Justin Fields. I really am. And I understand that so far throughout his NFL career, we've sort of seen a passing ceiling with Justin Fields. But if you take his years in Chicago, and if you say those years were too unstable for him to really grow the way that you would want him to, whether that be from the coaching staff, the offensive line in front of him, the lack of playmakers. There were a lot of reasons why I think Justin Fields probably failed in Chicago. Not that he's totally blameless in it all, but then you see him in Pittsburgh, and last year was the best that he looked. So if you can convince yourself, hey, he was never really going to grow in Chicago, and then you put him in a situation that's a little bit better and he actually did show some growth, I can convince myself that I go, yeah, okay, well, maybe the best version of Justin Fields, we haven't even seen yet. So I think I am tempted to say the guy that I would have next on that list is Justin Fields. And then I think actually Aaron Rodgers would be after that. Again, maybe I'm going like too pie in the sky with it, but I wonder if he got humbled a little bit over these last 2 years. Leaves Green Bay, kind of calls his shot. He's a legend there. He knows he's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the best to ever play the game. He goes over to New York. It's a big city. He's going to be the savior of that franchise that hasn't had success in a long time. He has the injury, and then it was just a disastrous year this past year. I wonder if he's humbled a little bit. If he's going to keep playing the game, I wonder if he goes, you know what, let's go to a situation where I'm buying in, it's cohesiveness between myself and the ownership and the general manager and the coach. It's maybe less of, him calling his own shots and things like that. So I actually think my ranking of these guys would probably be Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers. And then I can see your Russell Wilson argument. I don't disagree with it. I think that Russell is still a winning quarterback in this league. Is he a playoff winning quarterback? Probably not, but it's basically like him, or how much can you stomach of Jameis Winston's craziness and that roller coaster that comes with him every time that he steps onto the field. So that's probably how I would rank them. But what do you think about Fields and Rodgers?
No, Fields, I think, we did see him function better in the passing game early in the season, and there were still some arguments that he should have played the whole year. I get it. He went 4-2. He was getting rid of the football quicker. I think you just have to be able to maintain that sort of development and still build the offense around his legs, right? I think being in an offense with a really good run game would help him, where he can be another option in the backfield. And then Rodgers, look, I can tell you personally, if you're associated with, or if you're a fan of the Jets, that's going to humble you. So that might be the case. I just think with Rodgers, the passing numbers were still pretty good last year, depending on which ones you're looking at. The lack of mobility is an issue, right? He would have to go to a team with a really good offensive line, and I know he still gets rid of the football quickly, and the arm talent, there's still something in there, but I think he would really have to go to the right situation, and then a team would kind of have to deal with still the circus that goes on with around having Aaron Rodgers on your football team, right? So, look, you mentioned it. He tried to go in and basically run the Jets. It didn't work out. I think anywhere he goes, there's going to be a bigger spotlight, right? I've kind of looked at Indianapolis as a place where he could go and succeed, but then it causes a whole controversy with Anthony Richardson, and is that worth any production you could get on the field? So I think Rodgers still has something in the tank, but there is a lack of mobility, and there's a lot that comes with it.
Yeah, I think that Cleveland is sort of in their own world, or in their own bucket, when it comes to what they're having to deal with, having Deshaun Watson, their salary cap situation, perhaps having to trade Myles Garrett. So that situation is a little bit, on its own and isolated. But I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm putting myself on the spot as well. I think the Titans, the Giants, and the Raiders, the three teams that also have major quarterback needs that we often has as quarterback destinations for the NFL draft. I think that all three of those teams need to at least bring some sort of new quarterback in before we get to the end of April. So they're going to have some sort of change. There's got to be some new face. Is there somebody who, just like right off the bat, of this group, you'd say, okay, I like this guy for the Titans, I like this guy for the Giants, I'd like this guy for the Raiders? I mean, I like Justin Fields going to the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that's a really nice pairing for them. If he can go over to the Raiders and they could say, okay, we at least have Justin Fields going into next year, then they don't feel like they have to get super aggressive to trade up into the top three to leapfrog the New York Giants, or do something that they don't want to do for this quarterback class. So, like, I look at Justin Fields going to the Raiders as making a lot of sense. I think Aaron Rodgers makes sense in Tennessee. Does Rodgers want to go to Tennessee with the last year of his career? Maybe not, but I like Rodgers' landing spot in Tennessee. And then for the Giants, maybe Russell Wilson. I guess Russell Wilson probably, if they were gonna sign one of these free agent guys. And that's outside of like the splash guys like Matthew Stafford. Obviously, we talked about if you have a chance to go get one of those guys, you probably do it. But that's probably how I would say it. I would say Rodgers to the Titans, Russell Wilson to the New York Giants, and Justin Fields to the Las Vegas Raiders. How do you feel about it?
I'm kind of stuck between Tennessee and Vegas for Darnold because I think Pete Carroll, the question is going to be, does he want Russell Wilson for the old connection and just to know what he is and have a veteran in there? So I'll go with Darnold to Tennessee. I think it's just in case they want to take a different player outside of a quarterback with that first overall pick. It would free them up to take, say, Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter with that first pick. Right. I'll say Darnold to Tennessee, Wilson to the Raiders to keep that to keep the Pete Carroll connection going. And then I guess by default, Fields to the Giants, because even if you draft a quarterback, you could kind of bridge him in and at least, again, give Fields a chance. I don't know that a team is really going to give Fields a shot to start 17 games this year. He may have to continue to prove it 5, 6, 7 games at a time or for as long as he can be productive. And Brian Daboll might not be a bad place for him or a bad coach for him to be with, considering some of the work he at least did with Daniel Jones's legs, right, and working him into the run game. So I'll go with Fields to the Giants, Wilson to the Raiders, and Darnold to Tennessee.
The only thing that I have the pushback for here with those is I feel like Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll were butting heads towards the end of their Seattle times, but perhaps both of them now meeting in different organizations, they go, hey, is it water under the bridge? We letting bygones be bygones? Maybe that would be the case, and I think that they could certainly raise the floor because they have worked together and they know how to have success together. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video, and if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you become one today.